I wanted to talk, I think, about a couple of examples in the context of how you get stuff you already know how to do out to market, a bit where Jim was. And also just to emphasise Jim's point that efficiency comes first in all of this, guys, right? So I'm not going to talk much more about it, but that's first. Not just efficiency for you and efficiency for your customers and efficiency in the supply chain. Walmart, great example. My kind of reference is some work that indeed WWF and Shell were associated with, done by McKinsey & Company, and you may have seen their abatement curve. Now, the conclusion I want to draw from that abatement curve is there's enough stuff available to do to make a substantial difference. Now, how much you think you have to do depends a bit on what you think, indeed, the target needs to be. But there's stuff to do. From our point of view on that curve, there are a couple of important things to do. One of them is biofuels, and the other is CO2 capture and storage. We think the biofuel story is an essential story because we think it's the clear short-term option to diversify transportation fuel away from oil, one task we want to set ourselves, and one of a small number of options to achieve that in the long term, and it has the capacity to drive down CO2 emissions, provided that we can all agree what constitutes the sustainable deployment of biofuels and biomass. And so top of my agenda, in deployment sense, is getting an agreement about that. Yeah? And it's almost more important that we get an agreement than exactly what is in it. Although I know some folks may not agree with me entirely when I say that. But this is the game for governments, NGOs, academics, and business to work on together so that we get clear long-term frameworks that reward both the CO2 reduction and the sustainability. They need to get credited in the system in a way that, for example, volume mandates just don't achieve. So that's one piece of the work program. The second bit is that there are a set of things we do know how to do today, and there are a set of things we may know how to do quite well 5 to 10 years from now, which are on short enough delivery timescales that they will also make a difference. I would describe those as advanced biofuels, and particularly getting to the issues around competition with food and marginal land use. And so I think we need to see these as demonstration phase activities, which do benefit from public-private partnership for the purpose of driving them to market earlier than they would come left to their own commercial activity. And the public good is that it provides you with more reduction opportunities earlier. The second bit's around CO2 capture and storage. And one of the things I want to say about it is that in order to believe that you ought to do this, you need to believe that fossil fuels are going to be with us for quite some time to come. Clearly, I do believe that. I think, as you've heard me say, their share of transportation will go down, and that there will be other effects which cause that, efficiency, electric vehicles, etc. But CO2 capture and storage is, I think, an essential part of the story. IPCC estimates it's 1/4 of the solution by 2050. So it's not a silver bullet, but it's big, it's important, and it's not happening now. So what do we need to do in order to make that work? So first of all, what's the target? For me, the target's clear. It's early deployment in 2020. We need this because each 7-year delay adds another 10 ppm by 2050 to the overall CO2 equivalent concentration. So we also have to recognize, though, that it's one of the few technologies which will be deployed only because of the climate constraint. So recognizing that, we need to put it into a space that gets it delivered. By the way, I'd add that natural CCS is an and here for me. So it's not CCS or forestry, it's CCS and forestry. And by the way, it's CCS and biomass for fuels and electricity to get you the negative emissions I believe will be essential for meeting any of these targets. You need to take the CO2 out of the bioprocessing and put it back underground to get yourself a negative position. So I think that setting a price for carbon matters. Emissions trading schemes can help us. I think the European Union has shown how even in a recessionary environment, you can use the trading scheme to create the incentives to do the demonstration phase activity for the 10 to 12 demos that are in the pipeline. So going forward, as we look at the international piece, what I would like to see is that there would be a similar CCS project mechanism brought into play, and that delivers a convertible certificate which can be shared amongst those who choose to play, and I'll come back to that. It could be you could do that under the clean development mechanism, but I'm not sure that CCS is a development issue in this way, and it may be better to have a separate process that recognises that rather than try to shoehorn the two things together. Wherever there are technology funds, they should work on the demonstration phase of activities, because demonstration phase is to demonstrate and validate the technology, it's to drive down costs, and it's to create public acceptance. We often underestimate the last piece. If the public won't let you do it, they won't let you do it, and then it won't happen. So we have to be very clear that we get to the space where this is one of the things that people understand. So to get these things to work earlier than they would work on a normal commercial timescale, in the case of CCS, I'd argue to work at all, you need governments and companies to work together. In the case of biofuels in particular, we need the sustainability story and the CO2 crediting piece to get worked out soon so we don't make bad investments. So I think here's some step-by-step stuff to do. I'm always in the bit that says, okay, so that's fine, but what do you actually want to do between here and there? So what I want to do is I want to encourage domestic cap and trades. I want an international framework, including a mechanism that recognises CCS and a new tradable certificate to work that. Funds and allowances to support the commercial scale demonstration projects, and then within the convention when we get to Copenhagen, the possibility to have satellite agreements amongst willing smaller numbers of participants who will share certificates and trade that activity. So particularly for CO2 capture and storage, and to get the liabilities and technical and legal issues sorted out. For those of you who are interested, happy to share a paper on how satellite agreements amongst the willing few should be added to the overall agreement with the many. And then business's role is, once that stuff in place, it's to do the necessary work to get the stuff out, bring the costs down, get the public acceptance so that we get delivery around 2020. Clearly, we want to do all of this in a cash-strapped world. But we take clearly the point that linking this kind of activity, whether it's those I'm talking about or other green and renewable energy activities, is part of the process of priming the pump to come out of the recession. View we hold very strongly. So I don't know whether this economic crisis is going to last for months or years, but it doesn't matter. We need the right outcome in Copenhagen so that we can take advantage of it when the upturn comes. Thanks very much.